So I'm going to take a minute just to show you a thing or two about the saw. This is not your grandpa's table saw. This has a thinking, sensing brain in it that is basically there to save your fingers in the event of contact with the blade. Instead of cutting your fingers off, as any other saw would do, this saw, if it detects any kind of disruption in the electromagnetic field or the current that's being passed through this blade, it triggers a release of this aluminum brake cartridge, okay, which is going to slam into the blade almost instantaneously while the whole mechanism drops down below the table. Okay, it's pretty amazing. You can go on YouTube and you can find videos of people sticking.
There's a link on the course website.
Hot dogs. There's one guy who actually puts his own finger into the blade because he trusts the technology that much. As much as I trust this, I'm not that guy. Let's say this works 99.9% of the time. You don't want to be that 0.1%. Ripping. Okay, that's using the fence like this, where you're basically creating a set distance between the fence and the blade. You ever see this ruler over on this side? It's got a little readout here. Okay, that little cursor. Okay, if it's on 9 inches, that's the distance between the fence and the blade. Okay, so I get it where I want it, and then I push this handle down, it locks down, and I'm ready to make my rip. So this, I know it's going to be widest in the middle. Okay, so I can set this at a little less than 10 inches. All right, and I want everyone to just watch what my hands do when I make this rip, okay? I take off a little bit more, a little bit narrower here. Sometimes you get a little piece that's on the outside of the blade, like that wasn't like a kickback. That happens, but it's really nothing to worry about. The kickback is when it's on this side of the blade. Okay, that's what you really need to look out for. What I have now, I've got these 2 parallel edges. It's the same all the way down. Okay, so I was able to cut off that wavy, gravy edge. All right. You asked a really good question. Is there any way to prevent that? Okay, sometimes you have a little sliver of waste that's kind of hanging out next to the blade there. As long as it's not pinched between the blade and something else, it's not going to come flying back at you. That just kind of scooted toward me like that. No big deal. There's no force propelling it at me. If I were making a rip like this, and I stopped here and let go of the board, and that's a common mistake, it can propel it backwards, and then you have a kickback. All right? That's most common when people are ripping really thin, light pieces of wood like this. They're coming through, and maybe they forget to use a push block or something. They say, "Oh man, I'm not doing that," and they let go. Whack! I'm shooting back. In fact, you ever see that dent in the metal there? Anyone guess where that's from? Yeah. Wow. So, for that reason, when you're making a rip like this, you don't necessarily need to be standing in the line of fire. Okay, you can move your body just a little bit out of harm's way. Okay, see, that's a subtle difference, but the difference between this and this could be the difference between me having children or not. All right, so be smart about it. Use your head when you're thinking about what can possibly happen. All right, kickbacks do not need to happen if you are smart about the way you set up your cuts. You're smart about having things like this push block.
Could you show them how that works, Seth?
Absolutely. This push block, obviously a very sophisticated piece of technology. What this does, like the one I showed you with the joiner, it hooks onto the workpiece and allows you to guide it through. Okay? Guide it through the cut so your hand's out of harm's way. Does that make sense? Anytime you're using the table saw to rip something, I'd say 8 inches or narrower, use a push block. It might say something slightly different in your manual. I believe it's 8 inches. That's my personal rule of thumb. That's the margin of safety I leave for the blade. So that's about this size, okay? So when you're getting into narrower stuff, like this, if I want to rip that, I'd get it to point with my hands, and then I'd finish it up with this. So I'll show you what that looks like. Let's say I wanted to rip this to 3 inches. All right. Check my blade height, bring it down just a little bit. And normally we would have the dust collector running, but just for the sake of being able to carry on a conversation, I'm leaving it off, okay? So, fire it up. Watch what my left hand is doing and watch what my right hand is doing, okay? So, you saw how I pushed it all the way through the blade until it was totally past the point of being in contact with the blade. See that back? Thank you. So, it's almost like I'm shooting pool. Does everyone see that? My left hand is doing two things. It's pushing the wood in toward the fence and it's helping to hold it down. It's kind of guiding it. My right hand, I'm providing the thrust to push it through. And I'm using my thumb to kind of hook on. Okay, I'm not just going like this where I'm only relying on friction. Okay, some people do that. They try to push it through like this, and then you just moisten your finger a little bit, and you get to a point where it starts getting some resistance from the blade. You can't push anymore. That's why you need to hook your thumb on there to really push it through. Okay, does that make sense? So again, I'm right-handed. This is how I do it. My left hand is holding it in toward the fence. My right hand is pushing it through. When I got to this point here, when I'm, say, 6 inches away from the blade, that's when I pick up my push block and I finish the job. So that's ripping.